even if on silent mode, with the recording equipment in the committee rooms. Today's meeting has been convened to consider in Part A a supplementary estimate for Vote 35 Army pensions and in Part B for Vote 27 international cooperation. These motions were referred to the Select Committee by Dáil Éireann on the 21st of November 2018. Briefing has been circulated to all our members. Supplementary estimate for Vote 35, it's in relation to Army pensions, and in Part A of today's meeting we consider the request for a supplementary estimate for Vote 35 Army pensions. I would like to thank Minister Crowe and your officials for attending and assisting our consideration of this supplementary estimate. I also want to thank the Minister and his department for the briefing material which has been circulated to all committee members, and I also want to remind members that in accordance with standing orders, discussion should be confined to the items constituting the supplementary estimates only. No other matters relevant to the departments. So I'll ask Minister Crowe to make his opening remarks.
Chairman, committee members, and I note that the Australian Ambassador is in the public gallery here this morning. I thank the committee for the opportunity to present for its consideration the 2018 supplementary estimates on Vote 35, the Army Pensions vote. The Army Pensions vote makes provision for retired pay, pensions, allowances and gratuities payable to or in respect of members of the Defence Forces and certain dependents. The 2018 estimate provides a gross sum of €239.1 million for the Army Pensions vote. However, gross overturn this year is expected to be €242.6 million, which leaves a shortfall of €3.5 million. The €3.5 million required at 1.5% of the original gross estimate. Later on in my statement, I will deal with the recent spending review of Spending Forces pensions expenditure, which is particularly relevant in the context of this supplementary estimate. I will now set out the position regarding the relevant subheads of the vote. Subhead A2 is the largest subhead of the Army Pensions vote. It covers spending on all pensions benefits for former members of the Department of Defence Forces, the PDF, and their dependents. It accounts for 96% of all military pensions spending, including gratuities. It is demand-driven and non-discriminatory. The original provision of some €229.2 million for subset A2 will not be sufficient to meet all requirements for the year. In the circumstances, the shortfall on subhead is estimated at €4.7 million. The main reasons for the shortfall in subhead A2 are as follows. The number of Defence Forces pensioners has continued to rise during the past year. At the end of October 2018, there were some 12,450 military pensions of all categories. This is a net increase of about 460 since the end of 2013. Based on available information, it is projected that 340 military personnel will retire with a pension and lump sum in 2018. Overall, the level of turnover during the year was greater than what is provided for in the original estimate. This is driven by nature of turnover Defence Forces personnel annually, allied with increased life expectancy generally. New retirees going on pension continue to outnumber the deceased pensioners by a ratio of 2 to 1 on average. In other areas of the public service, most people are at a standard retirement age, and so their numbers and timing of departure can generally be predicted well in advance. However, the PDF is different, and the vast majority of military personnel who retire on pension do not so voluntarily. That is therefore reaching the maximum retirement age and at a time of their choosing. At these voluntary early retirements are not known in advance, this can contribute to greater than expected expenditure on military retirement benefits in any given year. The situation is a product of the availability, for operational and HR policy reasons, of the early payment of pension benefits immediately on retirement after relatively short periods of service and regardless of age. So in any given year, forecasting the Defence Forces pensions expenditure and the exact numbers of retirements is very difficult. During 2017, some 70% of military personnel who retired on pension did so voluntarily, and the picture is much the same for 2018. In addition, many retirees qualified for the maximum retirement benefits, which also contributes to the ongoing increased expenditure. The shortfall of €4.7 million on subhead A2 will be partly offset by expected savings of €1.2 million in subheads A3, 4, 5 and 6. To sum up, the purpose of the supplementary estimate for vote 35 is to seek additional funding of €4.697 million for subhead A2 and reallocate savings of €1.197 million to subhead A3, 4, 5, 6 and into subhead A2. This leaves a net supplementary estimate requirement of €3.5 million. Earlier in my statement, I referred to the recent 28th spending review of the Defence Forces pensions expenditure. The review, which was published on Budget Day, was carried out as part of the 2080 round off of spending reviews and was undertaken jointly by my officials from my department and the Department of Public Expenditure Reform. Briefly, the review came to the following conclusions. The Defence Forces pensions expenditure and pensioner numbers have been increasing progressively year on year, and this trend is forecast to continue in the short and medium term. Military pensions expenditure, in common with public service pensions, generally is demand-driven and non-discriminatory, so it cannot be arrested or reversed in the same way as may be possible in other aspects of the Exchequer expenditure. Defence Forces superannuation arrangements differ in a number of key respects to the wider public service. These distinctions include earlier and more unpredictable retirement turnover with entitlement to immediate pension benefit, and atypical faster rates of benefit accrual. These factors make it more difficult to accurately predict annual funding requirements in any given year. Of particular relevance is in the review's conclusions that funding allocated in the annual estimates process for Defence Forces pension benefits has proved insufficient in recent years. This has led to an annual requirement of a supplementary estimate, largely met through identified savings from Defence Vote 36. In noting the supplementary estimate that have been required in the past, the spending review goes on to recommend that the Army pensions vote should be allocated resources in line with the cost of analysis in the review from 2019 onwards to ensure that the full cost can be met. As the committee will be aware from previous estimate debates, it has been my stated intention to seek extra funding from military pensions as part of the overall budget negotiations, and I am pleased to report that solid progress has been made on that front. As announced in Budget 2019, an extra €10 million has been allocated in the 2019 estimates for Army pensions, a 4.2% increase. This follows from an additional €6 million in 2017 estimates and an extra €9.5 million in 2018 estimates. As stated in the pensions briefing material provided to the committee for today's debate, the extra €10 million in Vote 35 for next year is generally in line with the forecast for Defence Forces pensions expenditure for 2019. The situation will be constantly monitored over the course of the coming year to ensure that appropriate funding is in place to meet all requirements. In conclusion, I now wish to commend this supplementary estimate for the Army pensions vote to the committee, and I will be happy to take any questions regarding this vote.
Thank you very much, Minister. Deputy Niall Collins.
I don't have any questions, Chair, just to say I'm happy to accept.
Deputy Barrett.
Yeah, it's just a general question insofar as that. Is there a time where we should be, holding on to Army personnel for longer periods than sort of giving sort of attractive pensions at a relatively early age? I mean, I'm throwing out the question, not necessarily agreeing with what I'm saying, but it's a question that has to be answered in this day and age. Like, can we afford to have a situation where people can retire as is part of their right under the existing scheme, and it would mean a change in rules and regulations for new people coming in? But it strikes me that it's an uphill battle all the time, and I'd like to ask the Minister, Are we under strength at the moment? Excuse me for being a few minutes late, but are we under strength at the moment as a result of retirements? And this naturally becomes a bigger problem when the economy is going well and people have other options. So, you know, the Defence Forces, we spend a lot of money, and rightly so, in training people and, you know, all the other things that go with the Defence Forces. And then we sort of are left at the mercy of whether these people are going to stay the course or, you know, take early retirement. And all I'm saying is, in this day and age, has there been any review or thought of reviewing the conditions in which people join the Defence Forces and the length of time that we expect them to serve? Now, it's just a general question, but it strikes me that, you know, it's a constant thing that you don't really know if people are going to take up options.
Barrett, Minister Joe.
Thank you very much, Deputy Barrett, for that question, and it's a very important question. First of all, let me say that the pensions for personnel changed in 2013. So there is a kind of a person leaving now, like, you know, they're on the old pension regime, and there isn't a kind of an attractiveness there that they get their 21 years and they get their pension, whatever, right? So, and they can go out and work and they're fitting well and able to do so. But on the wider question that you've asked, it's a HR issue. And this is a white paper project. As you know, the white paper on defence was published in 2015. And the specific issue that you have referred to is a white paper project. And it has been looked at in that context. And you have a very valid point in what you have stated. But I think there's a balance that we have to reach as well, in that you have to have members that are fit, healthy and able to do the day-to-day duties, if it let it be overseas or whatever, or what is expected of that person, let it be male, female, to carry out the regular duties that are expected within the Defence Forces. But I can fully understand where you're coming from, and this is an issue that has been looked at in the context of a white paper project, and I do expect that we will have some progress made in this shortly.
So we wait for the white paper?
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks. Minister, back a few years ago, I recall there were quite a number of members of the Permanent Defence Forces who had to cease membership when, after 20 years service. They were still very young people, both men and women. Is that 20-year fixed term, that's gone now, is it? Because those people were disappointed to be leaving, and there were, as Deputy Barrett said, that a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, a lot of skill, and they were a loss to the Defence Forces. It's a fairly blunt instrument, you know, 20 years. Person joined at 17, 18, whatever age, they were still young, fit people. Is there a different retention measurement now in regard to age or length of service?
Similar to the answer that I gave to it, within the white paper project, there's a gap analysis project, and that's one project within the white paper that I'm bringing forward to look at where we have gaps within the organisation, and that we can then look at the criteria for extending the service beyond beyond what their retirement age is. And the examination of retirement ages for enlisted personnel has been prioritised also. So this is an area, because of the challenges that we are facing on retention at the moment, and like, you know, recruiting, the annual recruiting is not going to get us out of the problems that we have. So we have to look at the other areas, and this is one such area that you will refer to and what Deputy Barrett has referred to.
Deputy Barrett?
You know, it strikes me in this day and age where people are healthy and living longer and active and fit, especially army personnel, that it's a great loss, not alone in terms of having to recruit people to replace them, but experience, you can't buy it. And, you know, 20 years is a very short time. Somebody goes in at 18 and they're gone at 38. So the best part of their working life is still in front of them. Now, I'm not saying that, they should stay until 65 or anything like it. I mean, we have to be practical about this. But I think in this day and age where you need to keep people of experience and, you train people and they do a great job and we're very proud of them. But it's not that our troops are actively engaged in sort of warfare or doing dangerous work. By and large, I say, they do peacekeeping missions and do it exceptionally well. Very proud of them. But it just strikes me that, like everything else, and I'm glad to hear that as part of your white paper, that you're reviewing all these things, because, these things can trundle on, and maybe people are leaving, and you can't buy experience. It's something that you just cannot buy in any walk of life. But like to be losing, and especially when the economy picks up and other opportunities arise, it puts a tremendous strain, I would suggest, maybe I'm wrong, on the likes of the Defence Forces, because there are plenty of options for people to leave and go and get other employment. I mean, they're very, very good personnel. You'd love to have them in any walk of life, but it's just that from the country's point of view and the point of view of our Defence Forces and the role that we play in peacekeeping, which to me is always a very important part of something I'm very, very proud of, rightly so. It just strikes that maybe we should be really seriously reconsidering. But I accept what you say. You're having a white paper and you're looking at this, but I'm glad to hear that that's the case.
Yeah. Just to also, Deputy, we are working with the representative organisations on this issue, and this has been raised with me through the rep organisations. Has been the first time that it has been raised with me, but this is an issue that we will have to face, and you're quite right in saying that there are some people that could stay on in the organisation, but at the same time there are as many opportunities for personnel to progress right through the organisation and for promotions and everything like that, and they can have an opportunity to stay on well beyond the regular retirement age, if they were to say just a regular soldier. So there are opportunities there, and promotions are continuing. There are over 700 last year, or this year so far, or 600 this year so far. So, but there are opportunities there, but definitely it is an issue. The gap analysis on the white paper project, and it's something that we are seriously considering.
Thanks, Minister. I very strongly share Deputy Barrett's view in regard to experience. As a society nowadays, just not in Ireland but throughout the world, I think we don't value experience
Absolutely.
and corporate knowledge. Unless people are putting stuff up on Facebook and tweets and all this type of social media stuff that's governing too many people's lives today, there's not the respect or the appreciation for experience and skills and knowledge that's built up over years by person through their profession or whatever trade they pursue. And I'm sure there are plenty of people leaving through natural retirement, that leaving jobs with very important corporate knowledge that's not on a file. And I'm not saying that people omitted to leave notes and that on files. I'm not suggesting that, but knowledge that's built up through interaction at meetings and through participation in work, we don't value that to the extent that we should as a society. And I think I don't know how you would counteract that trend, but I think we should be cognizant of it, of the value of the corporate knowledge and the skills and the experiences. Deputy Barrett said again, Minister.
Yeah, no, you're right in saying that, Deputy, and specifically a German, specifically people going overseas that have that corporate knowledge and that really take that with them to show the younger generation or the younger personnel that are within the organisation, to show them the rope. But that's the same with every organisation, that people will say it's the older people have the corporate knowledge of the organisation. It's very important that they hand that down to the next generation.
Yes. Minister, thank you for your presentation today, and of course we all agree with ensuring that there's adequate funding put in place to meet the requirements of the people who have served our country well. I think this will be the last engagement that we'll have with you, Minister, in 2018, to thank you and your officials for your cooperation and engagement with us over the course of 2018. And could I ask you, through your offices, if you would extend to the Permanent Defence Force members and the members of the Reserve Defence Forces our appreciation as a committee of the work they do on our behalf, both on our island and in missions overseas as well. I'd very much appreciate if that message could be sent to all the serving members through their ranks, to assure them of our full support for their work and our appreciation of the work they do so well on behalf of all of us, and they do such good work in promoting the interests of our country abroad in their different peace-keeping missions as well. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Could I just say, I'd like to join with what you... I mean, one of the nicest experience I had in my 37 years in public life was the short term I spent as Minister for Defence, because it's a unique position to hold and very rewarding. But you're dealing with people who are all the time very committed to what they're doing. You don't, you get, like everything else in life, you get the odd bad apple. But as a force, they are tremendous, and they represent this country so well, both here and abroad. And you couldn't buy the good publicity that this country gets from the missions that they partake in. And I'd like to think that maybe you could send back, as the Chairman has said, our good wishes and thanks to all members of the Defence Forces for the work that they continue to do.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Deputy Barrett. That concludes consideration of the supplementary estimate for vote 35. In accordance with Standing Order 90, a message to that effect will be sent to the Clerk of the Dáil. We will now suspend until 12:30. Is that agreed? Agreed. We have another select committee meeting at 12:30. Thank you. Request for supplementary estimate. International development. I would like to thank Minister Cannon and his officials for their attendance and assistance in consideration of the estimate, and I also want to thank the Department officials for the briefing material which has been received and circulated to all members. Minister.
Chairman, members of the committee, I want to use this opportunity to present to you the 2018 supplementary estimate for Vote 27 international cooperation. When the Taoiseach launched Global Ireland, our strategy for doubling the scope and impact of Ireland's global footprint and influence by 2025, the Government also committed to achieving the UN target for ODA of 0.7% of GNI by 2030. And thanks to the extraordinary efforts of the Irish people, our economic recovery is now well established, and we now see the real benefits through increased resources to our public services. For 2019, we allocated €817 million to official development assistance, a very substantial investment on behalf of the taxpayer and a clear demonstration of the Government's commitment to our aid programme. It's also a first step towards delivering on that UN target of 0.7%. However, robust economic growth has put a downward pressure on our ODA GNI percentage outturn, and over the recent past, we have seen the target fall from a high of 0.59% in 2008 to 0.32% in 2017. For 2018, we set ourselves a target of 0.3%, and as it stands and based on current projections for GNI and allocated levels of ODA, we are now unlikely to deliver on that target. And the supplementary estimate I am now proposing will facilitate delivering the ODA GNI percentage target of 0.3% in 2018. And that brings the total 2018 budget allocation to Vote 27 to €515 million, which, coupled with ODA from other government departments and Ireland's share of the EU development cooperation budget, will, I am confident, deliver on that commitment of 0.3% of GNI target for this year. These additional resources will help in the following areas. We will contribute to Ireland delivering on that 0.3% for 2018, to which we committed at the beginning of the year. Support delivery on key political commitments, including the Taoiseach's commitment to increase Ireland's contribution to the EU Trust Fund for Africa. Contribute to delivering on Ireland's clear commitments to education, and in particular education for girls. Support effective multilateralism and rules-based international order in response to changing international politics, which has seen, for example, the withdrawal of funding from organisations such as UNRWA and UNFPA. Build on a government priority to increase support to conflict prevention and peace building. And in the context of all that, I just want to take this opportunity to briefly touch on Ireland's new policy for international development, which we will launch early in the new year. Our new policy will deliver a fresh approach to the transformative ambition of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It's defined by our values, it reflects current realities and responds to the challenges of the increasingly complex international and development cooperation landscape. It will be built on the foundation of the SDGs, which provide an interconnected international policy framework for action, allowing the space to specialise and to sharpen our focus. And, as has been the case in the past, our primary focus will be on those furthest behind. We will have a central focus on addressing extreme poverty, vulnerability and marginalised groups. We will build on our track record in reaching the poorest and most vulnerable. We recognise there is much to do, and reaching those to date who have been left out of progress will be difficult. We have identified a number of key areas which we are working to flesh out. These include reducing humanitarian need, promoting gender equality, strengthening our work to address climate change and to strengthen governance. We want to work in a structured and a strategic way across these key strategies such that each reinforces the other. A culture of respect for human rights will underpin all of our work. We will use our leadership and our influence in multilateral forums to build collective support for targeted actions in support of interventions in these areas. Conflict prevention and protection will be a key focus, building on our own experience here at home and responding also to the call of the UN Secretary-General on the need to focus on conflict prevention. We will seek to reinforce the intersections between Ireland's peacekeeping and conflict resolution work, political engagement, development cooperation and humanitarian action. I have often said I am passionate about Ireland's development cooperation programme, as passion I share with my colleague Taoiseach Simon Coveney, and in making sure that we excel in how we target and deliver our resources for maximum impact. We are reducing inequality, poverty and hunger. We bring our own very authentic experience to this work, delivering a world-class programme aimed at some of the world's most vulnerable and marginalised people, helping to save lives, to build livelihoods and to bring life-saving humanitarian assistance to those most in need and in times of crisis. And in that context, I would welcome comments and questions from our committee members. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Seán Crowe.
Minister and colleagues. I want to welcome, first of all, the commitment to provide more funding to UNRWA, especially in the light of the US decision to stop funding for their vital work. You mentioned there will be an additionality of €2 million for UN Peace Building Fund that will coincide with Ireland's membership of the UN General Secretary's Advisory Group on Peace Building. But firstly, will this money be specifically directed at one peacekeeping issue, or is it pooled funding? Secondly, could you provide more details of our membership of the advisory group? How long will it be for, and when will we actually join? Again, welcome the additionality of €5.5 million being proposed towards the Global Partnership for Education, and you mentioned in your speech that in relation to education for girls, will the amount of this specifically ring-fence for how is it going to operate? We know that girls face significant and different challenges in accessing education than boys. The multilateral assistance mentioned will be €3.5 million increase in funding the EU Trust Fund for Africa. Again, I've expressed in the DAW, I've expressed this, concern about this whole project, and the EU policy surrounding migration seem to be based on an inherent contradiction. On one side, there's acknowledgement that migration is a structural phenomenon with long-term implications driven by deep development and governance shortcomings, and then on the other hand, the EU's reaction is the most most part tailored towards the short term. We've seen an increased tendency to divert funds formerly allocated to European development cooperation to the task of migration management and border security, and I suppose that element that I'm particularly concerned about. I think this weakens the EU action in the realm of poverty reduction and good governance. Luca Barana, a researcher in the Piedmont Centre for African Studies in Turin, has produced an excellent analysis, I think, of this. And I think Libya, again, it just shows how these short-term fixes largely ignore deeper and structural challenges. And despite the chaotic situation on the ground, the EU has invested heavily in border and migration management in Libya. I think this also includes a brutal, the Coast Guard stuff. We've had evidence given to this committee publicly and privately in relation to the arms and militias, the slavery and so on, the trafficking. And again, the aim seems to be to stop people, leaving Libya to seek asylum, which is again a human right, and to keep them there when their human rights are clearly being violated. According to EU data, all EUTF contributions in North Africa, particularly Libya, have so far been devoted to the issue of migration management and control. So is there, is this where the extra 3.5 million Irish funding will go, or is it going to go to something else? Hopefully it is. I think we should stand against this increased focus on short-term security implications. And lastly, in your speech, you were talking in terms of the conflict, some of the money will be going towards conflict prevention and protection, and that'll be a focus, building on our own experience at home. But could you maybe expand on that, exactly what you hope to do in relation to that? Well done.
Minister Cannon.
Yes. Thank you, Deputy. The Peace Building Fund, you asked the question, is it going to be specifically targeted, or is it just for into the general? It's just in the general fund. It's an additional funding of 2 million, and that's very, very strongly aligned with emerging priorities in our new international development policy, and obviously would coincide with Ireland's membership of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Group, and Ambassador Anne Anderson is a member of that advisory group, extensive experience, and this was what we bring to the table in terms of that peace-building endeavour is our own experience of conflict resolution and peace-building and the security of peace that we have here in Ireland. We bring that to an international context and have a lot to offer. So this additional funding allows us to come to the table with huge credibility in terms of our financial commitment, also in terms of our national experience. In relation to the Global Partnership for Education, I was delighted to attend the pledging conference for the Global Partnership for Education in Dakar a number of months ago, where Ireland committed at that time an additional €25 million over 3 years. And you asked specifically about girls in education, and having spoken extensively with the board of the GP, who coincidentally are actually meeting in Dublin next week with my invitation, I know that girls' education, rather than being somehow singled out for special attention, actually pervades all the work that they do. It is a central tenet of their ambitions worldwide, and particularly in the countries in which they work in, to ensure that a unique focus is placed upon getting girls into education, retaining them in education, and ensuring when they do attend that they're receiving an exceptionally high quality education. I was also very pleased at the time when I first met with the GP to meet Malala Yousafzai, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who's been a powerful advocate, global advocate for girls in education. In relation to the EU trust funds, that additional amount of €3.5 million is to meet the Taoiseach's political commitment to the Trust Fund for Africa. And as you mentioned earlier on, it is about addressing the root causes of forced migration. If we are to get to the very, very bottom of these issues, identify what they are, and be credible in attempting to work in resolving them, we have to make significant financial commitment to that. Ireland's total pledge is €15 million, and this extra funding, combined with other funds, will mean that we have delivered €8.9 million of that by the end of this year, and we're going to pay the balance in 2019 and 2020. Migration, and it's probably the challenge of our generation, demands an international response. And in that context, I'm happy to report that Ireland will be present in Marrakesh on December 10th and 11th for the UN conference to adopt the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration, and my colleague, Minister of Justice Charlie Flanagan, will represent Ireland at that. Your last question was about
conflict prevention.
Conflict prevention, yeah. Maybe Rory, do you want to take up on that?
Thank you. Thank you. Is there?
It has to be the Minister.
That's fine.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
Sorry.
Specifically around what
Give us an example of what is actually going to be. You're saying there's going to be extra funding towards it. What type of work? Does it involve? You're talking about security and protection. So what type of work is it? Facilitating meetings. Is this? Is it actual personal protection and so on?
Well, what it's about is growing capacity, growing both governmental capacity and civil society capacity in each country in which this money is being invested, so that they can identify very, very early on flashpoints, conflict flashpoints, and work within, drilling right down to community level and indeed civil society and ultimately governmental level, to be able to identify early on where the conflict is arising and work at addressing it. Secondly, a lot of investment and a lot of time spent in empowering women in conflict zones, recognising the very unique skill set that they have, which we again experienced in Northern Ireland, in addressing the causes of conflict and being central to the solving of conflict. So, they are the key areas we're focusing in. It's about better governance, capacity building. We're working across 30 different countries in terms of the investment that we're making, and in empowering countries right down to community level, and really plugging into civil society in all these countries to ensure that they have the capacity to very easily and at a very early stage identify where conflict is arising and work to address it as soon as it does.
Colombia, it's been a huge investment,
yes, exactly.
and the fact that the figures are going up and up,
and as you know, we were central to that.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy Seán Barrett.
Yeah. Mine is just a general view that vast sums of money are being spent in these parts of the world, and I switch on my television and I see horror, and I say to myself, where is all this money going? Where is the cooperation to really tackle this thing? Parts of flood of people leaving Nigeria to go somewhere else and all that. It becomes frustrating, and you say to yourself, if you put another bill... Yeah, no, but I mean...
You can become disillusioned.
Yeah,
yes.
No, but it's not just... It sounds as if we put another billion into the annual, if we had it to give it. We don't seem to be, and it's nothing to do with you personally now, or the officials, don't get me wrong, but as a general thing, we don't seem to be getting on top of these horrible scenes that we get on our television screen and the poverty that's present in various parts of the world. There's a lot of talk going on. And it strikes me that if we had a greater combined effort, like a European combined effort, to deal with these problems, instead of us all going off for our own little bits and pieces, but that doesn't seem to happen. And for me, it's a bigger issue, rather than whether it's another 100 million that we give or whatever. This is dealing with a problem that doesn't seem to be going away, if you know what I'm getting at. And I like to see that we're doing things and seeing results as a result of our effort. And doing it on an individual basis, and we're part of the European Union, we should be attacking this, in my opinion, as a European venture to deal once and for all with these horrific scenes and get rid of them. And if we have to pay our bit, fine. Now, if we want to do individual things of a less serious nature, but things like projects in Africa or something like that, that's fine. You can do little projects and feel that we're satisfying ourselves. But it just strikes me that we aren't really going anywhere with dealing with this horrific problem of hunger and people leaving their home base, chasing around the world and being chased, you know, looking for a decent living. And it seems, and yet the world is getting, by and large, a richer place. You know, it's a richer place than what I was brought up in 70-odd years ago. You know, but it's just that it's a bit frustrating, and in no way am I moaning to you. I'm just making the point that I think, and maybe you could fill us in, is there a genuine effort to approach this on a European basis, you know, rather than us just fighting our corner and doing a bit?
Okay. Yes, there is. And, you know, you're correct to point out that on our own, we are not and never will be equipped to resolve this, which is why our new policy, which will be published early in the new year, stresses on really strongly on collaborative approach and growing alliances, not alone within the European Union, but indeed across the whole of the United Nations, in recognition of the fact that ultimately, if we are to solve the ills and the problems of this world, we need to do it on a collective basis. And I'm an eternal optimist, always have been. And, you know, global poverty is reduced by about 50% in the last 30 years. It is working, albeit very slowly, it's working. You know, you look at the Ireland of our grandparents, it was a substantially different place to the Ireland of today.
We're living in luxury.
We are, but our grandparents and our great-grandparents certainly didn't live in luxury. I mean, you know, where I come from in the west of Ireland, it was mostly about subsistence farming, hand to mouth. And now we produce enough food to feed 11 Irelands. You know, so that's an extraordinary transition. I think
I'm not talking about Ireland.
I know, but I'm giving this context here, Deputy Barrett, in that, you know, you can't give up in terms of trying to work with other countries in embarking upon the exact same journey we embarked upon 200 years ago. I mean, the decision by Donogh O'Malley in 1967 to make free education free for all was powerful. And right now, around this city and around this country, we're seeing the impact of that. That's why we're investing €25 million in the Global Partnership for Education. That's why when I sat in that room in Dakar and I saw you know, education ministers from all across Africa saying, we're going to roll up our sleeves and use this investment wisely. That's a long process of evolution as well, in terms of their education systems becoming, you know, giving them the same strength to empower their young people to have the same success as our young people are experiencing right now. You have 1 million additional young people coming into the workforce in Tanzania every year. You have 2 million coming into the workforce of Ethiopia every year. By 2050, Africa will be the most dominant economic power on this planet. So we've got to ensure that those young people have the skills to partake in that economic growth. And the relationship between Africa and the European Union is really, really unique in terms of trade. Trade between the continent of Africa and the European Union is 30% higher than it is with China and the US combined. So there's a very special relationship there. And we, as I say, at the centre of that upcoming new policy on our international development programme, will really focus on working closely with our partners in the EU to maximise those trade opportunities, so that ultimately our relationship with the African continent will evolve over time from one of aid to one of trade, and that's ultimately what we're working towards. And as I say, I'm very optimistic, and you know, and I think, and many of you have, and I think you're going to the US fairly soon to meet our diaspora communities. But many of you have travelled to the African continent to see the work of Irish Aid and other NGOs that we support on the ground there. And when you do come home and reflect on that work and the impact it's having, I think you can only be but optimistic. And in terms of our approach to international development, it's been recognised internationally over and over again of being an exceptionally high. It compares with the best in the world. So we are, I would argue, to a certain extent, leading the way in arriving at solutions that have been devised by these people sitting beside me and by my colleagues in the department, but ultimately, in collaboration with others, can have a really powerful global impact. And that's why I think it's important that we, and it is easy to get disillusioned, but that we don't become disillusioned.
No, I'm not disillusioned.
Okay, okay, all right.
I'm not disillusioned. Okay. I'm just saying that for all the effort that I have You know, I'm 37 years since I was elected here, and I've listened about the role of, you know, the very powerful role that Ireland, as a small little country, has done an enormous amount of good throughout the world. But I'm just saying that when you switch on your telly, you say, are we standing still, or are we making improvements? And
we're getting there. We're making progress. There's no question.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd love if we have, perhaps, Chairman, we might at some stage have a little open session here talking about policy and that sort of thing, rather than just deal with it.
Yeah, well, when we publish a new policy, let's do that.
Yeah, because you know, rather than just deal with this sort of thing when we have the estimates, you know,
yes.
I think to talk about our role and the sort of things we want to do and would like to do, I'd appreciate it.
But you're absolutely correct in pointing out that there needs to be a greater focus on that collaborative approach, both within the EU and indeed internationally.
Thanks, Minister. Just with regard to Deputy Barrett's point, I suppose our review on Irish Aid that the Greens Committee did, I hope it can play its part in your development of new policy. And it
very much so, and it was a significant factor in allowing us to arrive at the policy we arrived at. So.
Good, because we had considerable engagement, both with Oireachtas colleagues and with NGOs and other interested parties as well. Minister, with regard to Yemen, and Deputy Barrett referenced the fact, you know, it's so dispiriting when you turn on televisions and listen to media, you know, that there are so many crises throughout the world, and I suppose there are crises that we're not even aware of, with hunger and conflict, to the extent that we should be aware of them. I hope that you'll be in a position to allocate some additional funding to help those people who are suffering so much on literally in a famine situation. I know some funding has already been allocated, but I hope it will be possible to make a substantial allocation to try to ease in some way the plight and the suffering of those people.
Yeah. Thank you, Kerlik, and I couldn't agree more. It's the world. The bells are ringing. Okay, just quickly, it's the world's largest humanitarian crisis. 22 million people in need. And Ireland has been and remains absolutely committed to supporting humanitarian effort in Yemen. We provided €4 million to the Yemen country-based pool fund, which is a significant contributor to the UN's Central Emergency Response Fund, which allocated over €50 million to Yemen. Given the significant risks of the humanitarian situation declining even further, we propose allocating an additional €1 million to that in 2019, bringing our total funding to €5 million. And again, in terms of the words I spoke earlier on about conflict resolution, again, Ireland's expertise there, I think, is being brought to bear and will be brought to bear in terms of working towards the root causes of this horrendous humanitarian crisis in Yemen.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy Crowe.
So an example of that would be, say, the Palestinian conference. Is that one of the examples?
Yeah.
I just think that, you know, there's such, like, the work that's being carried out is transformative. It's changing people's lives. It's, you know, AIDS was the big challenge of, you know, the previous century. You know, again, the huge positive work. The fact that poverty is being reduced. A lot of the stuff is man-made crisis, and I suppose that's the frustrating thing for people who are watching at home. That, you know, here we have another conflict and so on, but that's made by man, and, you know, and it's mainly men that are causing these conflicts. So there's some of the things. But hunger, inequality, disadvantage, they're all the things that need to be addressed. And if we're playing a positive role in that, and Irish Aid it's not tied to, you know, government policy or anything else. That's the big key, and you're transforming people's lives. And the fact that you can produce, you know, come up with technologies that can produce double the amount of food in a particular area and so on. That's transformed. That changes everything. The fact you're bringing water to your village and so on. You know?
And an area in which Ireland has incredible expertise in terms of agricultural technology. We're leaders in it. So, yeah. And let's have that conversation when we publish the policy. That would be great. Okay. All right. Okay.
Thanks to Deputy Barrett and Deputy Crowe and Minister. Minister, earlier at our joint committee this morning, we had representatives from Crosscare, from Safe Home Ireland, and from the Council for Prisoners Overseas. in regard to issues affecting returning
immigrants.
immigrants. So we look forward to engagement with you on the Indicon report early in the new year.
We're very interested in doing that. I met with Crosscare just 2 weeks ago to have. We're working towards the 30 recommendations of Indicon. We've about 24 resolved. There's a few more difficult than we expected, but I'd be more than happy to give you an update early in the new year on that.
Appreciate it, Minister. That concludes consideration of the supplementary estimate for vote 27. In accordance with Standing Order 90, a message to that effect will be sent to the Clerk of the Dáil. I would like to thank Minister Canning and his officials for attending this afternoon.
I will now adjourn Sina Dia.